Daar zijn we weer met de Vechtersbazen live chat. Net als vorige week gaan we weer een uurtje lekker live hier op Insta. We hebben een hele speciale gast, die gaan we zo uitnodigen. Maar om te beginnen ga ik natuurlijk al enige partner in crime, de former Strikeforce champion of the world, uitnodigen. Daar komt ze al aan als het goed is. Even kijken of de verbinding mee wil werken.
Wender.
Ja, daar is ze. Hartstikke idee. Alles doet het, internet doet het. Bij jou doet ook alles het nog.
Ja, soort van. Ik zelf niet meer, maar we hebben weer een kopje thee. Hè? Dus,
Hoppakee. Ja, ik weet, jij bent van de thee. Ik zit hier met een blikje Elvis juice. Dus ja, eigenlijk wel toepasselijk voor degene die we straks in de chat hebben. Want het is eigenlijk ook een beetje de rockster onder de MMA-analisten natuurlijk. Glamrock. Ja. Zullen we niet... Wat zeg je? Wat zei je?
Direct, want het is niet zomaar iemand.
Nee, hoe moeten we deze man omschrijven? Hij is de koning van de one-minute breakdowns. Hij doet analyses, onder andere voor Bellator, voor Karate Combat. Hij was laatst ook als color-commentator bij Gamebird Fighting, de nieuwe organisatie van Masvidal. Maar hij doet nog veel meer, man. Hij heeft zelf ook gevochten. Wist je dat trouwens ook?
Ja, ik ben ook zijn record, heb ik ook even gecheckt. Maar hij heeft ook NAKA gedaan, heeft ook gegrappeld, heeft MMA gedaan. Dus ja, en een hele rockcarrière. En ik zat te googlen en dan zie je ook Joe Rogan die hem aanhaalt. Hoe hij dan een mantis versus, weet ik veel, een van de andere insect. Hoe die dat ontleedt.
Ja, de murder hornet versus de praying mantis.
Dat kan verzinnen, dat je zo geobsedeerd bent dat je zelfs insectenpartijen gaat bekijken. Ja, nou ja, dan heb je mijn hart gestolen.
Super vet. Hey, volgens mij zit hij al in de wachtkamer, dus we gaan hem gewoon uitnodigen. We hebben het natuurlijk over de enige echte Robin Black. Bink, even kijken of hij al daar is. Want volgens mij zie ik hem al meteen verschijnen. En dan gaan we vanaf nu ook overschakelen in het Engels natuurlijk, want Robin spreekt geen Nederlands. Dat gaan we hem nog wel leren, maar dat is nog niet zo ver. Dus als het goed is, komt hij nu 3, 2, 1. There he is! My man!
What's happening?
What's going on
Man,
with you?
Dutch is a beautiful language. I have no idea what you guys are saying, but it is a nice language. It's got a nice sound to it.
Don't lie.
It's true.
No.
It's true.
One with Japanese friends of mine, it sounds like when you're talking Dutch, like you're choking, like.
No. I like it. Yeah, it's got a mix of kind of fluidity, but it's tough too. Like if you think of it as a fighting style, it's like if Stephen Thompson just threw some elbows sometimes, you know. Like it's got that kind of flow to it, but it's got a little bit of slicing and hacking in it too. I like it. I dig it.
And if you have to translate Italian into fighting, what would it be? What kind of a fighter?
Italian.
Gotta be Vittori.
Yeah. It's a little like louder, a little like more aggressive. You know, it's a little like more pressure, more intensity. I think. I feel like Italians are always yelling. I don't know if that's a stereotype or not. Yeah, a lot of yelling and you know this has been a weapon in particular ancient Chinese martial arts. So maybe that would be part of an Italian fighting style, sort of a snake attack. Yeah, everything is martial arts to me.
Yeah, man. Listen, I appreciate making the time for us, man. Like I said, been a big fan of your work for a long time. You've done so many things. And before we get into like actual things, I want to talk a little bit about your background, because everybody knows, at least anybody who's interested in martial art knows you from the 1 minute breakdowns and all the stuff you do. But I think there's a lot about you from your previous life that people might not know. So I'd like to talk to you about that a little bit first.
Sure.
For instance, the fact that you were a professional MMA fighter yourself. I didn't know that originally also.
Yeah. I had nine pro fights. I wasn't a great fighter. You know, my first fight was about 10 days before my 39th birthday, which is, you know, that was pretty crazy. And I really started training full time at about 2 years before that. I've been a martial artist all my life. I've been obsessed with martial arts. And, you know, I really wanted to do...
Can I stop you for 1 minute? How did you start martial arts? Because I want to know your full dough.
I was a weird little kid, and I was very hyperactive, and I didn't have a lot of interests. And I think my parents were somewhat concerned. And then at about 6 or 7, I just became obsessed with... I did gymnastics, and I did high diving. So a lot of my sort of understanding of biomechanics and human movement and kinesiology and things. I studied kinesiology for a year at university too. But as a little kid, I was a gymnast and a diver. And then I was obsessed with martial arts. And my parents would drive me 2 hours each way. Both my parents worked, and they would get off work and drive me 2 hours, then sit in the car for 2 hours while I did taekwondo, and then 2 hours home 3 times a week. They did that because they thought I would amount to nothing if I didn't have some sort of order in my life, and they were probably right. But a lot of everything I have and everything that I get to do in my life now is connected to my parents doing that when I was a child.
And were your parents martial artists as well?
Nope, they were not, but they always I have 2 brothers, and from the time we were young, they were like, if there's something that you love, pursue it. And I did, my father grew up on a farm, and his family, nobody in his family had ever even got a grade, gone to school past about 7 or 8 or 9 years old. They just dropped out and went to school. And my father went to university and became educated and sort of built a life. And so my mother lived in Wales, in the United Kingdom. And then she moved and traveled with the army as a nurse to travel and see the world. So my parents believed in hard work and committing to things. And so I was very lucky. I had 2 driven parents that were willing, that saw that this was the thing I was into and encouraged it.
Wow.
Yeah, so you started out with taekwondo. Why taekwondo and not like karate or judo or wrestling?
Honestly, where I lived was a little small town, and about 2 hours away was a city called Winnipeg, which was kind of it's the biggest city in the little province in Canada where I grew up. And when we drove in on the big street, there was a sign, and it said taekwondo and karate. And so I wanted to do karate because I knew what that was. And so we went in, and my parents showed me around, and I wanted to do it. And when they went to sign me up, it said taekwondo on the thing. And I was like, I want to do karate. And they just and the instructor, who's the 7th dan in Taekwondo, World Taekwondo Federation, he was like, it's basically the same thing, kid. And then I was in Taekwondo. So that's what it was sort of an accident. I wanted to do karate, but that's what they had, and that's what I started learning.
Yeah. And for how long was that the martial arts? Because I know later on you picked up jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
For how long did you do just taekwondo?
So for about 7 or 8, kind of, and through high school and into sort of my early 20s. And then I didn't do a lot of martial arts training. I was still read and obsessed, and I sung in a rock band, and I did lots of kicks, and I stretched every day and stuff. But I didn't train sort of actively until in my mid-30s again. And then I started really training Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, and boxing a lot. But I always was interested in sort of more about like how the human body moves and how our brains kind of connect to how we move. And so the more I became interested in the movement of the human animal, the more I was interested in different kind of martial arts too.
And what was you picked up? Well, let me put it like that. Martial arts again in your mid-30s.
Yeah, I played in a rock band, and we were on the road and like just drinking all the time and doing lots of drugs. And after like a particularly heavy tour, I had kind of a hypoglycemic seizure. I was very sick when I got home, and I was like, I have to get my shit together. And the first thing I did was go into a jiu-jitsu gym. And as soon as I was training jiu-jitsu, it was going to be every second day, and really quickly it was every day, and then very soon it was twice a day, and then I was just back. And that was
founding jiu-jitsu after all those years of partying hard, that made you long for more, that you came in every day at a certain point?
It was almost as if it was as soon as I started to train purposefully again, I realized I knew that was my favorite thing. I read and constantly was consuming martial arts, but I wasn't doing it. I think we're scared of things. If you put something off long enough, it seems scary. You're not sure if you'll ever do it. And the second I was training, it was all I wanted to do. And I didn't sort of regret that space in between, because I learned a lot from it, and I lived as an artist. So I started to think as an artist. which is really good for martial arts and really good for my job now, and really good for the, you know, so there's a lot of value in living as an artist, but
Okay,
then physically, yep.
Okay, because I don't know anything about that. So how does an artist think?
That's a very good question. I think that's a very good question. I think probably the most important element for all of us is how we think. And I think that is a practice. I think figuring out what is your process? How do you process the world around you? How can you get better at understanding the world around you? How can you, you know, examine the truth of the world around you? And I think now I live as an analyst. I analyze things. I've always been curious about how things work. But going back and figuring out how to go from not understanding how to do jiu-jitsu to winning tournaments and fighting and moving your body, that the process of that somehow teaches you the process of thinking. But thinking now.
Thinking in concepts.
Yes. Thinking. So I'll try something with you. Think about anything in your mind that you do not, think of a concept or an idea or anything in your mind that you do not have words for.
Ooh.
That's a tricky one.
It is. So it's hard, right? Like you almost cannot do it. And the reason that is we think words are the things that we use to explain our thoughts. But that's not true. Our thoughts are created by the words that we have access to.
Yeah, I'm feeling, I get what you say.
Yeah. So
learn the language of a certain concept before you can truly understand it.
That's right. And in fact, the language that you learn is what you use to create your understanding. What is this in just your front hand projecting forward in Dutch? What is that?
Call it the same, a jab.
It's called a jab.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you know any other language that is called anything else? Because it is. I'm sure in China this is something else.
We can call it a stoot.
Stoot?
Stoot.
Yeah.
Stoot?
Yeah.
Okay. Stoot is not
wait,
word.
One more.
Stoot?
Okay, thank you.
Stoot. I also have a lisp, so it adds an extra excellent element to it, which is weird, right? Like I literally make a living speaking, and I have a speech impediment, which is really wild if you think about it. But stoot,
yeah.
Stoot. Okay, stoot is not a word for jab. Stoot is a word for this motion. Jab is also a word for that motion, but they are not the same. They are not literal translations of each other. Each one is the translation in which the language pictures that thing. And it sounds small, but it's very important, right? Like there's, and this is not a truthful sentence I'm going to say, but you've heard this many times that, or maybe you haven't, but in Inuit is the proper word for Eskimo, right? We've heard the term Eskimo. That's sort of a racist term. It's actually Inuit. It's a Canadian native that lives in the north. The Inuit live in the north. There's snow. They have, you know, apparently they have 16 different words for snow.
Yeah, I know. We have it in for like water, and people who live in deserts have it for sand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why? Because they relate to that thing on a much more meaningful level than we do. To us, it's just fucking sand. And the best we can do is say, well, it's hard sand or brown sand or light sand or soft sand. But they have literally different language to connect to their much deeper understanding of that thing. And that's what we try to do with anything. If you play piano, if you're a poet, if you are a martial artist, my job and it's a cool job. I basically just study martial arts all the time and then try to find meaningful ways to share that with people in a way that brings them some kind of value, makes them laugh, or it makes them, you know, learn something, or, sorry, my phone just knocked itself over, or it brings some value to them. To do that, I have to develop a deeper connection to what this thing really is. I have to look at it in different ways. I have to understand it as it relates to the body and the mind, use different comparisons for it. How does it relate to all these different types of sand or snow? Like, and so that type of thinking is a practice. And any of us that study anything deeply, we're not just trying to learn more about stew or soup or the Dutch language or music or martial arts. We're trying to think differently. We're trying to be able to understand the world differently. And this is just a tangent, but we're probably all going to watch the UFC on Saturday night, right? Are you going to watch it?
I'm going to watch it, to be honest, because otherwise I will have a jet lag, but I will watch it. Yeah.
You will watch it. Okay.
Yeah.
And my friends work on that show. It's not their fault. I'm not criticizing a human. I'm not criticizing people here. But the way television will be presented to us, and I literally just wrote this trying to make myself laugh. I said, who's excited to watch provocative hosts and media-trained athletes ritualistically execute simplified verbal formulas in suits towards locked-off cameras from a well-lit desk? That's what will happen, right? It's not their fault. There's a structure created that will not allow them to speak factually about this art form. Mm-hmm. They will speak in the language of sport. They will speak in the language of entertainment. They will speak in a way that sells pay-per-views. They'll speak with whatever objectives to sell the things, but they won't speak truthfully. But we humans watch the news or sports or entertainment or the Oscars or whatever, and we think that what we're hearing is real and is truthful and is deep. And then we think we understand it. And we go out into the world thinking we know things. When in fact, we've had the world simplified to us in such a way that it's actually not real. Right? I don't know how I got onto this tangent, but these are the things that I think when you try to think or try to expand your thinking and try to think dimensionally, these are the kinds of things you're trying to think about.
No, yeah. Because we started out with like, how does an artist think? And we ended up with this amazing thought. Going back to that, if you have to put in like 2 sentences maximally, how does an artist think?
I think an artist thinks dimensionally, and I think they think from a place of understanding how little they know. And they do know how to connect with their audience, so to speak. That's what you're trained in as well. I think that's an element how the artist thinks in terms of being a practicing artist in society. But I think an artist thinks the way that a martial artist does or a painter does, and that is from a place of the most important thing I think that allows you to think artistically, dimensionally, is understanding how little you actually know. Like,
so you're open to what you receive.
Yes, and understand, because if I think I know a lot about, say, martial arts, mm-hmm. studied it for a long time, I think I know a lot about it. It will stop, like you're saying, it will stop me from allowing new information in. But the weird thing is, it takes you decades of living, maybe hundreds of years. Who knows how we would think if we were fortunate enough to live thousands of years. We would understand how little we know in the context of what is possible to be known. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think that is the root of trying to think like an artist, is understanding that I don't know, that I spent all this time learning to realize I know almost nothing. And I think that's the root of it.
But that can be a little bit frustrating also, which I find, because when I was 17 and very dumb, I thought I knew everything. And the older I get, and the more I know, the less I know. The more I realize that I don't know shit, actually, which is also kind of frustrating sometimes, you know?
Yeah, and it's a very, very, very strange kind of world that we're living in, because there's information everywhere. Well, most of it is sure that it's really correct. And almost everything we know if we could live for 1,000 more years of learning, it would be ridiculous. Almost everything we know. How my skin works, what color my eyes are, what earth is, what air is, you know, how to throw a punch. It doesn't matter. What's an apple? All of these things would be different if we lived 1,000 years of learning. So therefore, we don't know anything. But an even more important part is understanding a lot of people know a lot more than me, and knowledge is also real, right? When I go in and I train with a black belt, I know that that person has spent, for the most part, has spent a long time learning. And in the learning, I will learn a lot from them. I will occasionally learn from a white belt, but study is real. Information is real. Becoming better is real. Expertise is real. We live in a world where people actually think expertise is not real. Like, you know, I'll go to get my car fixed, and the mechanic who spent 30 years working on cars, now he could be corrupt. He could be trying to trick me, like that's real. But he has spent 30 years. My opinion of my engine is not equal to his, because he's an expert. Expertise is real. But yeah, I don't know how we got got into this
kind of stuff.
No. But if you take that standpoint there, because the older you get, the more you learn, and it's all about studying and improving, and especially martial arts. You know, you never finish improving, but at some point your body starts declining. So and luckily now with science and everything is getting better, so you see fighters having a longevity and performing on a high level. But for where is the tipping point, in your opinion, for fighters to reach the top of their capabilities so when they know the most and before they start declining?
So a buddy of mine sent me this clip. Now, it's hard to follow because there's 100 different types of competitive places. It's hard to follow them all. But he sent me a clip of the 17-year-old jiu-jitsu wizard just blowing through people, and the kid was super innovative and really, really skilled. And I spent a long time just sitting there watching it and then thinking about it. You know, he will be better in 5 years. Well, what point will he be worse? And where's that point at which now he's smarter and more experienced and has more that sensitivity and that fingertip knowledge, but then his body doesn't work as well? And so it made me kind of start exploring different things. And so gymnasts popped into my mind. And there's certain there are gymnasts that are at their best at 19. Like, why is that so? Well, because at 25, their bodies can't allow them to do what their neurology knows how to do. Yeah. So can fighting get to that point? And is it okay if we just give Vitor Belfort a whole bunch of drugs? Is that okay? Because if we do, now we got a guy who's 44 years old and has all the knowledge and experience that can only be gained that way, but he's got the body of a muscular 22-year-old. Is that okay? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm not the authority on what will be okay. But yeah, there's that line there where you continue to, like, Marloes, you are so much better of a martial artist than you were at 18, right? In like what you know, how you see it, how you feel it.
Yeah, but I also think like knowledge can also be an obstacle. And wild is go, and I believe like fighting is the exchange of energy, and there are many energies, and sometimes your energy can be blocked by thinking. And that's,
yeah. Like, so John Jones, right? Like, John Jones is better than he's ever been, but he doesn't fight with that audacity when he was young, right? Is he actually better? Because that audacity, that risk-taking, daring, like, that's not there anymore, but now he's safer. So you're right. It's so not linear. Oh, I get smarter. Yeah. Oh, I get physically different. It's there. And like most things that there are all these blending aspects to it. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Also, you have people who first have to fall very deep before they can recover and become better and stronger. So that's very personal. For me, I love the rawness of young fighters the best. I do love when they're very technical and very skilled and all, but that raw power that they just unleash because they not fully developed as a human being. I don't know.
Because they don't think too much.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're scared, and that helps them.
Exactly. That's okay, because then your energy will. For me, fighting is about the flowing of free energy. And the more free your energy is, I think the better you fight because you're more intuitive. And that's why I think I like young fighters the most. How is that for you?
I think I love what you're saying. There's a sort of a science, and again, it feels like a high-level science, but it's probably very rudimentary of what it could be. But there's a really amazing book that I read that Faraz Zahabi actually recommended to me, called Thinking Fast and Slow. And it's sort of, have you ever heard of it? Do you know it?
My partner has it somewhere here in the...
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm 100% sure, but we have too many books, so I cannot grab it right now. I haven't read it, so please tell me.
Okay, read it. Read it. It's incredible. If I say to you, what is 2 plus 2?
Don't ask me. You should know.
Yeah, no, very true. I should know. But if I just throw it out, 2 plus 2 is?
Yeah. 4?
Yes. Yes. But, and that, you didn't think about that. You just know that. And that automatically happens. If I say to you 243 times 6 minus 53, you can do that, but that is a different process through which your brain will have to operate. And we want to take that one, 253 times 6 minus whatever, and turn it into 2 plus 2 equals 4. We want to train ourselves so that that complex thing becomes that easy thing. And if we can do that, then we will do it in a fight. This thing will happen. I will do this. It will lead to this. And we'll allow ourselves to fight. And that's the beauty. And I've only had that experience a few times. I don't know how many you've had it, Dennis. Marloes, you've probably had it a lot of times.
Now, please tell me about one of those times. How did it feel? Where was it? Paint the scene. Why you say it in English? I don't know.
So that feeling... the feeling that you just watched yourself perform, where and this is very difficult to explain to somebody who's not fought in a cage in their underpants in front of people or a ring, while everybody's staring and there's cameras at you and you look down and your mom's over there and you can't hear your coach and you're starting to panic, and then that thing is very different than when you're in there and time has slowed. And you can see everything and you can hear everything. And I remember a moment in a fight, actually my very last fight, whereas his hand is in a position and I'm able to watch myself remember to use a wrist lock in such a way to just strip it off. Something I never did ever training, but that I could, in that moment, I not only automatically did it, but part of me could feel myself learning that when it happened. Do you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden you're just, I had it
with now once, probably more. This is the first thing that pops up. It was, I think, ADCC 2007, and I was fighting a Japanese girl, and she was so quick, and she was quicker. I knew she was quick, but she was quicker than I anticipated. And then I did a new arm lock, and afterwards I didn't know what I had done, but it was a new technique I had never done. I was flowing with her energy and the armbar always, and all of a sudden there was this new thing. Yeah, so I know.
Yeah, and you watched yourself do it, and it felt like Juan Archuleta. I was talking to him about this, and he sort of talked about how a lot of us understand the idea of flow, and most people have experienced it. If they played soccer as a kid, and there was that one day where just everything worked, they didn't have to think. Everything they touched went in. Some people have had a business meeting like that, or like they played video games and they just got into this thing and time changes. You know, your relationship with time changes. Most people have had that in some way. Juan was talking, we were talking about it, and he was talking about that feeling of being out front of it. We're sort of writing it. We're almost writing the story as you're also connected to it. And that's what you did that day, as you literally crafted an arm lock that was an extension of everything you had ever done, learned, who you were, what your body had learned, what you had learned about yourself, how you prepared, every arm lock you'd ever done, people arm locking you, connected to you being in a physiologically altered state. Because flow is literally a physiologically altered state where there are your brain chemistry. And I actually talked to Joe Rogan about this the first time I was ever on his podcast. I read a book on the plane called The Rise of Superman. We talked about it a lot that day. And then he had the author on a long time later. And he's analyzed flow by analyzing, which is that state of sort of superior performance, by analyzing people whose sport requires them to be in that for a long time or they'll literally die. Like, for example, a free climber. A free climber may be up the side of a mountain with no ropes or no nothing. 2 hours later, if they panic, they will die. If they dissociate from the connection of the experience of climbing that rock, they'll die. Or these people who flip motorcycles like 3 and 4 times, like in these things, they literally have to access this physiologically altered state of optimum performance or death will occur. So by studying them, he studied the process of it, where now when you see the best fights that you've ever seen, when Robbie Lawler and Carlos Condit are fighting, and it's something incredible, they're both in it. And they're both in it all the way through. And yeah, it's a special thing. And when people say that they're
because you know, because when you're a free climber, I saw also the documentary about the guy who did it, and his brain is actually altered, different from other people when he, but he's alone. So what happens when you have 2 people who are both martial artists and they share their energy, and you have the interaction? How does that create flow? And how is the flow different?
Yeah, this is the kind of shit that I will obsess about for the rest of my life. You know, like for the rest of our lives, we can think about this, because there will be a time someday in the future where we'll be able to look at the activity of our 2 brains when we are fighting and see that there is some type of communication going on beyond the physical. Well, of course there is, right? We know there is.
Only if you're already, you know, like sitting next to someone and you grab their wrist or whatever, just not like in a fighting scene. There's a communication already. And it's a non-verbal communication. So when you step onto a stage and you're very vulnerable and there's a lot of pressure on you, you have the other person who actually wants to inflict harm on you or pain and whatever. So you really get to your core. All these layers of personality are gone. You're not like Marloes or Dennis or you anymore. You're just this energy that needs to flow, become free. Entity, actually. Yeah. So I think that if you're in a cage, and that's the ultimate form of flow. Because when I was fighting, when I was fighting, I knew exactly what I was doing, and it went very quick. Though it felt like it lasted very long. But when the fight was over, I didn't know anything anymore. I only had like freeze images in my mind, and maybe I knew she had her hair smelled bad, or you know, stuff like that.
Weird things. Yeah. Or you remember hearing one woman in row 53 yell something, right? It's hard to explain, but
the fact that you have an other human being with it, that does something to the flow.
You're writing something together, right? And again, like when we have this conversation, this is the type of thing that can make people start to go, oh, and you know, this is metaphysical, right? But this isn't hard to connect back to what we all know. If the 3 of us, so I second or third or fourth this, because
nope.
Oh, I didn't hear.
I was frozen there. That's weird.
Robin.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Marloes, are you in Amsterdam too, or no?
Yeah. I live in Amsterdam.
Yeah. I think I'm coming to Amsterdam in a couple of weeks. LFL, Levels Fight League.
You're coming for the LFL,
and I think I'm coming for it, but we'll see. I've never been.
Good.
So let's say we're in Amsterdam, and the 3 of us start walking, and we're going to walk to the fights. Somebody could be filming us. We would not even be thinking about this, But we'd start in our own way, and 6, 8, 9, 11 minutes later, all of us would be walking in the same step. You know, we'd like both our right legs, both our left legs, like we were walking in a march, and we wouldn't plan it. It would just happen.
We resonate.
Yeah. Why would that happen? We don't know really, but it happens, right? There's clearly a science to it. I'm sure that there are, you know, people who study tribalism and sociology and biology who could tell us what that is, but most of us don't know it, but we know it's true. We've experienced it. So on some deeper level, this is happening when we fight.
Yeah, exactly. In trauma therapy, it also happens. It's about vibration of people who connect, and it's also how you can connect into a trauma. So I think, and again, what is a vibration? It's energy.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. But you're right.
I just want to get one thing in between for the people, because I see a lot of reactions from the people in the chat. A lot of compliments for you, Robin, and also some people are apparently freaked out by me because I'm not saying anything. Not because I'm a psychopath. I'm just really intrigued by this conversation and listening like a student of the game, because that's what why you're all here, and why people in the chat also. So don't be scared. I'm a normal guy. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we will try to squeeze them in between. And in a minute, we will talk a little bit about LFL, because I'm also interested to know how you got involved with this small Dutch promotion. But please continue.
But it's interesting. So we're fighting each other. If we are both in that sort of optimum state where we're able to and again, this sounds metaphysical, but we're somewhat a little more authoring of our reality. We're a little more authoring of our story. We're in much more, much less reactionary, where we just react, and more responsive, where we're able to respond in a way that suits us and we prepared. But if you and I are both in that state, something different is happening, and we don't really know what that is. I don't know that it's been studied. I don't know that it's been researched. I don't know what would happen if we fought in a high level and we were able to take scans of our brain in some way as we were competing. It would be really interesting, but something is going on. And these are the things, when I say we watch the news or politics or sports or ESPN or whatever, and we get something simplified and dumbed down to such a level, and then if we think we understand it, we actually think we understand fighting, when realistically something is happening on a level of the interactions of two highly trained nervous systems that we completely don't understand, and it could take us 20 years to understand on any level at all. And that's why it's so eternally fascinating.
How spiritual do you think martial arts is?
That's a very good question too. I think that's a tough one. It's a tough one to even verbalize. Again, like, I'm missing the words for sand here. Like, I don't have the words for snow to quite be able to do it. You feel an essence, right? Like, you feel a connection to the universe when you're doing something well, when you are doing something that feels authentic to you. It feels like you're expressing some truths. You feel much more connected to the world, to the universe, to the essence of what all this is. How I explain that any better than that, I don't know if I'm equipped. What do you think? Like, how spiritual do you think martial arts is?
I think working with your body is one of the most spiritual things you can do. And actually, I became spiritual through martial arts. I never was. I think I was, but I was never aware of it because I'm not from a spiritual environment. But the more I had interviews, and then I said, like, when I was fighting, there's no such place as time. There's no, there's you zone out, and it's very in the moment, and then when you become older, you get the words, you get the concepts, and you read a lot and you see a lot, then you just realize that there's nothing more spiritual than that. Like, for instance, in the Netherlands, we're not the most warm people on earth. We're not that peak. So touch is for us a very hard thing, where it's not America, where people learn to wrestle when they're young. I think that's one of the most wonderful things about America, that everybody learns how to wrestle. And also we're very rational for that part. So we live with a lot of people in a very small place, so we need to talk with each other. We need to talk all to make sure we don't smash each other. So it also makes it we're kind of afraid for emotions, like aggression. That's so not done here. It's like and training women for I do clinics, stuff like that. I always notice how scared people are of aggression. Though to me, aggression is just a very powerful energy. So when you're training and you're training a lot and you go into the gym and into the dojo every day and you learn so many energies that live within you, then you start to realize that you're not just a human being you're not just like Marloes and who has blah 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 blah. No, you feel that you're full of energies, and to me that's the best I can word it in a short.
Yeah. It's very difficult, right? Like,
there's somebody saying here in the chat also. Some people say martial arts is a religion, which, to some extent, maybe you could actually put it that way. Do you think?
It depends how you define a religion, but for a lot of people, that's a connection to something more real and meaningful.
Spiritual experience. Yeah.
Some people, if you believe you can connect to an essence of the universe through dance, which I think a lot of us believe that, or song, you can fucking do it by fighting a person or fighting with a person or being pushed to that limit with two, willing, unwilling dance partners with conflicting objectives, pushing each other to higher and higher limits of what's possible. I think, of course, you can. I think religion is a very difficult thing to even define. I'm sure there is a simple definition for it, but we all think of it as a different thing. But if it's somewhere where you feel connected to the universe, where you seem to have a structure of what you think is a right and wrong way to live, if you think it somehow makes you a better person, if you think it's a part of training to understand the world around you and leave the world better than you find it, then fucking martial arts is definitely a religion.
Yeah. Well, actually, even more so than an actual religion to me, because I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in some guy sitting on the cloud watching down on us. But religion, martial arts is something you can actually touch and practice and feel. That makes it kind of more realistic to me. But
it's. I mean, and everything that we're saying, I think, people who just truly love cooking, or people who love flowers, or people who have spent their whole life trying to make the perfect chair, I think they access similar things. I know fighting is different for many reasons, and many of the reasons are the reasons we love it so much: the danger and the fear and the natural elements of how it has been a part of survival and mating and the extension of the human race and all of these things. But I think trying to master anything, trying to study anything in such a deep way that you constantly reveal how little you understand about it as you break through new plateaus, I think people would find a lot of these things. I think there are a lot of people who who create animated art, who will tell you that it's a religion. It's like a religion to them.
Japanese, they have the concept of the shokunin. You probably know it. That to me is like, I thought, like, of course, only the Japanese can come up with something like that. It's like a craftsman who does something, and it's a wrong translation, but they do it with a passion and with a responsibility towards the community. And those people, they are like, I don't know, making teaware for the rest of their lives, and everything has to be perfect, and they do it. And I also think that if you do something, it's also Mr. Miyagi. Do something, if you're in a repetitive pattern and you do it over and over again, then you can see in the smallest movement, you can adjust to it. And the more deeper you go into it, the more you also find. So if you make like you feel it. If you do a punch for the first time, your arm goes like woo, up. And then when you do it more and more and more often, you have more evidence, so to speak, for what is close to the most right punch. Let me put it like that.
Yeah.
If you made the perfect punch, you will know for the rest of your life what is the perfect punch, and also when you're not making it. So
that's right.
I'm going totally off track right here.
No, I'm with you. If you know exactly how to physically express something just the right way for you, because your perfect right hand is not the same as Dennis's.
Well,
It's
actually, I do think that there's one way to make the perfect punch, because then that's the punch when the energy flows freely. And I think that's for everyone the same, don't you think?
Well, I think we're seeking the same thing, but how Dennis's spine will be shaped and how your foot works and where the muscle of your gluteus is and so forth. Conceptually, we are doing the same things to connect it from the foot through the hips through the whole body and express it out the knuckles of your fist freely and smoothly. That you and Dennis and I and everybody are trying to do that the same way. But I think there's variation in all of it based on our bodies and our minds and our,
True.
Yeah. But so one of my very favorite ideas, and Bruce Lee is very, it's famously attached to him, but it predates him, I'm sure, by 1,000 years, is the idea that, when you first see the art, a punch is just a punch and a kick is just a kick. And then when you begin to learn the art, a punch is so much more than a punch and a kick is so much more than a kick. And then when you master the art, a punch is just a punch and a kick is just a kick. And there's some incredible beauty in that. And you see it when you see people try to make sense of something. Dustin Poirier calf kick, blah, blah, blah. It's not about the calf kick. It's not about the calf or the weapon any more than if we say the person who painted the Mona Lisa, they just had such an incredible paintbrush. It's not about the paintbrush. It's about the art. It's about the artist. It's about the idea. It's about the thought, right? What's that?
It's about intention.
Expression, yeah. And, Prince. Nobody should be saying, oh my God, Prince's guitar is so beautiful. It's not the guitar. It's not even the notes. It's the art. It's the playing, right? It's the artist. Miles Davis had one, and I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, the note is 20%. Anyone can play the note. The attitude of the motherfucker who plays it is the other 80%.
Oh wow, yeah.
That, Miles Davis said something like that, and that's what I always wonder when we get to this idea that somehow you could achieve mastery, and we like to talk about 10,000 hours. I asked Frank Mir this, and I've asked a few different real elite martial artists who've been around for a long time. I've asked people this. We say it takes 10,000 hours to mastery. And of course, that's just a generalization. But let's just imagine there's such a thing as mastery, and it took you 10,000 hours. Well, what happens at 20,000 or 30,000? Right? Like this cannot be like a firm ceiling. Like there's got to be more, right? And that's part of the drive to stay healthy enough to be able to study your field at 60 and 70 and 80 is to find out what's on the other side. Like what is past that? How could you connect to it in ways that are, and that's where Bruce Lee, it's like a punch was just a punch and a kick was just a kick. A punch was more than a punch and a kick was more than a kick, and he mastered it, and a punch was a punch and a kick was a kick again. Well, what about later? Does it become, more again?
Yeah. Yeah, but it reminds me of when we had Andy Sauer on our podcast, and he was talking about Petrosian. And he said he wants to fight him once more. Well, they're now both in one. And he said the reason why he's so perfect is because he has all these concepts in his mind of fighting, and he has a very good eye. So he only has to move very little to make other people move a lot. So I think that if you add this 70K hours, that you don't have to work that hard anymore to get the result that you want to have. That might be an outcome of it. How do you feel?
Yeah, where it becomes just like another level, an ease, like, and I think we can see this in many ways. Like if we happen to, instead of, studying martial arts, we studied music, we would all know that person who can play something and it's effortless. It's just truly effortless. And if we went back 10 years, it was hard work. And if we went back 10 years before that, it was rudimentary work. And this truth is able, that we can learn from studying anything, is able to apply to everything. If you want to be a better friend, practice it. Like study what good friends do and try it, and then fail a little bit and then try it again. If you want to learn to speak, if I want to learn to speak Dutch, I know how to do it. It's going to be a lot of work, but I know I can do it.
Stick around long enough here. We'll teach you, no problem. Yeah. But a guy like Petrosian also, we talked a little about the Matrix before, you know, getting in the flow. You see Petrosian is one of these guys, he indeed has a very good eye, and he almost sees things happening before his opponent knows what he's going to do himself. He got such a, that's why they call him the surgeon, I think. And for how long he's been doing it? He's still fighting, and he's been doing it for like 16, 17, 80 years on the highest level, and still may be the best in the world in this weight class. It's insane. Yeah.
So cool. You know, so and I'm trying to figure out what that is and how to explain it truthfully. That's the other thing. Like, in a world of, oh my God, big right hand, striker versus grappler in a stylistic matchup, like, these are all television sports isms. They're not the truth. Right? I'm looking for the truth. How can I explain that truthfully? And when I try to find ways to understand it, you have to leave martial arts for a second. Okay, so I can't think. I've only studied martial arts for, 40 years. I can't quite think what Petrosian's doing. I can't quite understand. But where could I look at it with a fresh eye? And so baseball's not big where you guys are from, but you understand somebody throws a pitch. If any of us saw it, it would go like this. And we couldn't see it, like, at all. We'd be standing there like this, and then it'd be gone. And yet these hitters can not only hit it, but they can see it coming, and they can anticipate where it's going to go, and then they can know exactly, because it's only going to be a 100th of a second till it's there. Have their brain can tell them what arc to do it on a rehearsed physiological expression that they spent their lifetime doing. And then if you said to them, how did you know it was a fastball? You'd be like, I just know. But how did you know? What they can't explain to you is that ball, as it's being released, something in the design of how the shoulder is in that moment is being read by their brain, which they don't have words for to explain, or the time to explain it, because it happens in a millisecond, and it'll take 10 minutes to explain it, so they can't think it in words. But the brain is going to take in the knowledge of how this moves. It's going to extrapolate it into where this will be in 1/100th of a second. It's going to make adjustments into their entire body to ask their body to swing it in a way that they've spent their whole life doing, distribute it in a particular way with their feet and their hips and their back and everything, and they hit that fucking ball. And how to explain that is very difficult. But that's happening on and on and on and on through the entire fight. The entire fight is fastballs and stuff. And yet the best we can do, because if you just hire any fighter to just go and do commentary, they're going to, oh my God, he saw the right hand and he slipped and he did this. That is what happened, but that's not what the neurology did. The human neurology did a thing based on what you taught it, based on a long period of time, connected to the essence and a connection between our two minds during flow. Well, how do we explain that, right? And it's very difficult. But that's the challenge.
And in layman's term, we just call it intuition or fight IQ.
Yeah, fight IQ is a really bad one. We should definitely stop using that one.
Why?
Because that's like saying, like, so let's just pretend fight IQ is real. Let's just pretend that's a real thing. If it were real, we'd have to break it up into 100 other things. How are you at interpreting things in real moments? How are you at getting yourself mentally prepared for a round? How do you recover mentally between rounds? How do you read things as they come? How do you hear your coach? How are you able to process? All of which are separate skills. So somebody with a good fight IQ might be good at adjusting during the moment, but bad at resetting his mind in between. Somebody might be excellent at mentally preparing for the walkout, not very good at handling the pressure of having their nose full of blood. Like, there's so many thousands of variables, and we generalize that guy's good at this and that guy's bad at this. And it's just not true, right? It's just an incredible sports television generalization that's there. And it's a perfect example of what I was talking about. If we say it long enough, the audience thinks everything is snow or everything is sand, or there it is, we got it. Now you think you're smart. Well, what are you talking about, bro? John Jones has a great fight IQ. Well, Daniel Cormier's got a great fight IQ too. Now we can fight on Twitter, even though neither of us know what the fuck we're talking about. And that's kind of the world that we're in. So if you study anything for a long time, I think you want to find the truth. You want to look for the truthful ways to talk about these things, if possible, as best you can, which of course is very rudimentary compared to what you might be able to do in 100 years if you worked hard.
Yeah, that's insane. That's the same thing about.
I really love it.
Yeah, can we talk a bit of fights? Okay, I know you have a very profound and deep knowledge about fights and fighting in all martial arts, and I'm curious to know what you know about Dutch fighting and fighters in history. And
big names, large accomplishments. But actually my Dutch history is very poor, if I'm being, I mean, maybe I would surprise myself. Maybe I would be a D instead of an F. But, it's tricky. It's tricky because as soon as you start to commentate sumo, well, that's 100 years of sumo to absorb. As soon as you start to commentate Letway in Myanmar, there's hundreds of years to absorb. When my primary jobs now are Bellator, karate combat. I'm going to do LFL which I'm really excited about. There's a whole amateur league within LFL. Now you want to understand who these fighters are, what makes them special, who their coaches are, where they came from. So whenever you add another element, and that's why I love to be so busy, as soon as you add another element, I suddenly go, I think I have a good understanding of karate. Holy shit, every week I'm now going to analyze and commentate and contribute and post-fight analysis of karate. Do I understand it deep enough? Now you have to go deep dive into it. So, but the short answer is, I would say my understanding of the great Dutch history of kickboxing is poor.
Yeah. How did you get involved with the LFL? They had their first event. I know you were supposed to be commentating there, but you couldn't because you were together with me shooting the finale of Karate Combat.
Yeah, we were doing some of the some of the like acting stuff. People don't know this, but there are like sort of acting elements to it. Where Boss Rutan's traveling through time and stuff. We were shooting that kind of stuff. But yes, so I couldn't be there. And it was disappointing because Donovan is become a friend of mine. And he and a number of people in the Netherlands were like, we need to develop, a place where we can showcase really high caliber Dutch MMA fighters, but also where we can bring up Dutch amateurs and be a place sort of to centralize around Europe. Shockingly, there's not that much mixed martial arts in Europe. So and I'm just really, what's that?
No, there isn't. No, we have
There
Cage
really
Warriors in the UK, and there's some in Germany, but
and if
not
you go to
a lot,
Bahrain, there's but and I think the Bahrainian shows will probably expand more to Europe and stuff. But yeah, so. And that happened. We were sort of talking about it, and he was, putting the work together to put on the first show, and then COVID hit. And when you spend time with somebody who's working on a project that hasn't even launched yet, and there's a global pandemic, and they don't bail, they're legit. Right? Like, they're real.
Yeah.
And these guys were real. They were like, sadly, it looks like we'll be locked up for 12 months, so we have to find answers. It's like, okay, they mean business. Like, and it's awful that some people lost their business, all kinds of stuff happened, but these are the great tests. Do you love what you do? Because when a global pandemic hits or something bad happens or there's a war, that's a good chance to go close down what you're doing and restart. You've got a good reason to do it. And these guys were just like, no, we're doing this. I was like, okay, then I'm going to be involved. So I wasn't able to do the first one. We were shooting the TV elements to Karate Combat, but I'm definitely doing this one. I said yes to commentate it remotely, but then I just checked and it's like the borders have been lifted really well in Europe and in Canada. So I feel like we'll decide in the next 2 or 3 days if I can go, but I think I'm going to go.
Should come here.
Yeah, I know. I want
It'd be good to have you here. Yeah. It would be great. I'm interested also to see the second show. I didn't see. I saw it on the day after, but just this week got announced that Jason Wilness, I don't know if the name rings a bell. He was a former Glory champion. Has wins over Adesanya, over Pereira, over Joe Schilling. Switching to MMA, and he's going to make his MMA debut on the next show.
I did hear that, and I do know his
pretty
work.
Exciting.
Yes, it is. You know, a show like this where from day one it's good and you've got a cool element to bringing up high-end amateurs is great. But when you can add a name or 2 names to it, now all of a sudden you're in the second show and already it's big. My role will be to, you know, make sure that I bring sort of a shed kind of an artistic eye on, you know, some of these fighters. But yeah, I did hear that, and that is very exciting. And it's cool when you see somebody who was their whole life a specialist, and MMA really is a generalist, right? You know, you are a specialist. Marloes, you started in jiu-jitsu. What was your first martial art?
I wanted to start with kickboxing, but my mom didn't allow me. So I became BJJ.
Yeah. So you were a specialist at that time, but then now as a mixed martial arts fighter, you are a generalist. You fight in whatever. I like to call it free fighting, you know? And when it
brings up a trauma with all the Dutch MMA martial arts MMA fans, because back in the days it was called free fighting, but then we also had in our government questions were raised about if it was illegal or not. So this is like, what is it, Dennis? Like 1992?
Yeah, mid-90s, early mid-90s, something like that. Yeah, 93, 94.
So, but please, this is big trauma to me. So why will you want to call it free fighting?
Because I think the idea of what people think MMA is, I think is a very Western idea. I think its natural tendency was to at first combine established dogma created, you know, dogmatic styles. You kickbox, you do jiu-jitsu, you're a sumo wrestler, you're a Muay Thai wrestler. Let's combine them. Whereas now I feel like real and the weakness, the philosophical weakness of MMA is at first it said the flaws of all these other systems are that they are, you know, they're doctrines. You must do this, never do this, always do this, never, you know, and there were too many rules that were not based in truth. Because if you say you must always keep your hands up, but you're fighting a guy who wants to take you down and grab your legs, keeping your hands here is bad if you don't know how to defend the takedown. So these, in the realities of fighting, the doctrines that you were taught in particular styles were not true for free fighting. So historically we said, let's blend them. But now I think what for free fighting to really progress is you have to dissolve them. Like, it's not a blending of boxing and kickboxing and jiu-jitsu. It is a true use of all parts of the human body to fight freely. And this idea is, I feel it's a very dated, commodified idea to say, how's this guy's boxing? How's this guy's wrestling? Well, he's good at jiu-jitsu. All of that is kind of horseshit. When you're fighting in free fighting, you are not doing jiu-jitsu or boxing or kickboxing. You are free fighting.
No, it's about synergy. I think even more about, because when you're talking about free, then it's free from the old.
That's right.
But what's happening in mixed martial arts is that you create synergy. So let's call it fighting.
But how do you feel about this though? Because now, before there was all like the specialists, you know, the sumo wrestler going against a boxer, jiu-jitsu guy going against or whatever wrestler. And now the new generation, everybody's coming up as a mixed martial artist. So they're all around. They train everything from a young age. So we have all this, like you said, generalists. Well, I believe, I'm not sure you agree on this, this may lead to the extinction of the specialists. Now we have like still some special, like a one about Thompsons, like the karate, and before our friend Lyoto Mashida, and you have the Cormier Suro, the wrestling specialist, and
I think you will find people who have particular strengths, but they don't have to be punching or kicking. They could be in the strengths of how we blend from something to something else. There will be we have to find new dimensions to compare, because what we're comparing now is just, we're doing it because we've always done it. It's the same thing. There's a camera on me. I'm wearing a suit. I'm lit in a particular way. They come to me and I go, yeah, this guy's grappling is unbelievable. And they cut to my friend. Well, you know, if he can defend the takedown, you know, he's going to be able to implement his game. It's all bullshit, right? It's all horseshit. None of that stuff is really happening, right? And the flaws that happen with our language now is they go, see, isn't it crazy? You got wrestlers like Usman knocking out strikers like Jorge. It's because neither of those two things are true, right? No. It's not shocking that Usman knocked out Jorge, although they're both geniuses, brilliant. It's not shocking because you call him a wrestler and you call him a boxer. That's a flaw in how you talk, not a flaw in the truth of these two beings. Right? It's a flaw in our discussion of them, not a flaw of and a flaw in our understanding of them, but not a flaw in the truth of them. Because neither one or either of those things, and nobody is almost any of those things. And then some of the weakness of it comes where we're now, all we'll argue is words, right? If we don't understand things in a meaningful way in our flesh and in our blood, we just argue about the words we're using. Dan Lambert is one of the heads at ATT, and we were working together on Game Bred Fighting Championship. And Dan Lambert said, if you told me 10 years ago that karate would be way more important than Brazilian jiu-jitsu in fighting, I would have never believed you. And then we left it at that. And I thought, you know, under the old way of using controversial ideas to get clicks and likes, this would be perfect. Karate's more important than jiu-jitsu. We could argue over it on Twitter and yell at each other and call each other names, and use illustrations and debate it. The truth is, it's flawed because you're not doing either of those things. You're just fighting. And it doesn't matter, is this jab, is that Muay Thai? Is this boxing? Is it karate? It's I'm expressing a punch from using my whole body to express energy through two knuckles, landing it on your face. Call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter what you call it. And that's where our weakness is. And it's this is a very difficult plateau to get through in the sort of the broad understanding of combat, I think.
Yeah, I also get some other ideas. Like, I also think that people, that the personality of a person shines through in fighting, and especially in mixed martial arts, because it's so creative and you can show so many sides of yourself. So you have the people who just like to go to the ground, and you have the people who like to stand and, you know, bang. So apart from which martial arts you have started out with, or well, maybe that does also say a thing about you. What is it that you want to start out with? Do you want to really paint a knuckle on your head, or you're more into the flow of overthrow and taking someone down? And it's also your environment. Where do you come from? Do you come from an environment where you have access to all these martial arts and you pick out this one? So it's not even about, well, it is for sure about the words, but I also think that there's a very important aspect about the person of that who's picking out the martial arts and how they
100%. But that's what we just goes back to what we said about, it's not Prince's guitar that's amazing, it's Prince, right?
Yeah, I love those.
And Bruce Lee said this, but many have. Fighting is an expression of individuality. We all know that to be true, right?
Yeah.
We know that to be true. But the language that we have limits our ability to say that. If all we can say is, what are you, a kickboxer or a boxer? You're not either of those things. You're you. You know, you're you. So these are limitations of language. And the more, it's such a fun and exciting trip to try to to try to flesh these things out, because you go further and you try to go further and you try to understand deeper, and you go, why am I having such a hard time explaining this? Why can I understand it? How can I tell people about this? Am I doing a good job? Like, is that, and you realize, oh my God, the limitations are in the words that I have. The limitations are in my own, in the narratives of any kind. Narratives dominate your thinking, and you think you're thinking freely, but you're actually thinking within a hallway. And I don't want to get into weird shit that people argue about on Twitter, but if Donald Trump could only be like a Jesus-like figure, like called Q, that could save the world, or Hitler, if only those two things are possible, and you truly believe only those two things are possible, that creates a particular discussion and understanding and relationship to the world. And so any kind of narrative dominates your thinking, where you actually lose the ability to think freely and dimensionally. So yeah, it's a tricky thing.
What was the point when you started to break out of your own mind? That you realized, like, wait, I'm lacking word concepts.
I have these periods that are very stressful. Actually, they feel very stressful. And I've talked to a good friend of mine who's a performance coach, David Mullins. He's a sports psych and a performance coach. And I'm like, and he can usually see, like, where there'll be a lot of tension, where like something is wrong. I'm understanding that I'm understanding that I'm not understanding. Mm-hmm. I hit a point in it where I'm like, there's a limitation in the understanding, and breaking through that is usually very stressful, and usually a lot of tension, and usually it involves having to go back, realize how, somebody said my mic is off. Do you guys hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Yeah.
So often that's a joke. I just saw that pop up. Where all of a sudden there's a lot of tension, and where you understand, it suddenly hits you that you don't understand something, or something you believe you understand is fundamentally flawed. And that's usually takes some amount of time. Like, there were times, so for example, when I first started doing analysis videos with arrows and punches and explaining things, it was like 2012, so almost 10 years ago now. And I used to say, this guy does this. And when he does this, he's heavy on his front leg. And whenever he throws a hook, he has a tendency to move underneath, and he'll do this. And the more I did that, the more the audience seemed to like it, and my pieces were popular. But further along, I started getting to this tension. I'm like, wait a second. These guys aren't robots. This isn't a Dungeons and Dragons character or a video. That's a person. Mm-hmm. He can step on his back leg. He can move that way. He can also change his mind. He can not do this. He can decide not to throw that thing. He can practice. Jose Aldo, after he lost to Conor McGregor, we used to say he's the ultimate pressure fighter. He moves forward, behind, tight combinations and low kicks, and he'll break the will of yada, yada, yada. Well, fought Frankie Edgar next, and fought the entire fight moving backwards counter. Mm-hmm. So everything I was saying was wrong. And then you realize I'm not wrong about Jose Aldo. No. We are fundamentally incorrect through this entire process. And when I work, if I was on, a desk on a television program commentating something, they would be like, okay, talk about this guy striking. Well, he's a person who can express himself differently. If I say he's got heavy hands and he always moves forward, brutal low kicks, awesome jab, crazy power, and all of that is live. No. And then I'll sit there and it'll take weeks or months where I'll be like, well, what the fuck can I say? I don't want to. I'm being untruthful.
That's about the patterns, right? To some fighters, they have certain patterns, and they don't have to be necessarily the same all the time. But you can see over a period of a few fights.
For sure. And then let's go another layer deeper when we're talking about this. Okay, Conor McGregor got his calf kick beat up. What's he going to do to counter the calf kick? Well, he should probably check the kick. Okay, wait. If I know that, of course Dustin Poirier knows that. Mm-hmm. And of course he knows what he would do about that. And Conor knows what he would do about what he would do. So what I'm saying isn't being truthful. It's just nonsense. It presents it in a way as if these are just cartoon video game characters, unable to think and change, which is the most beautiful thing about being a martial artist, is you can change and adapt. And when you see a strategy that has to happen, that strategy, if understood by my opponent, creates a strategy in him, which I may then anticipate and change to exploit that strategy. All of that is true. How can I talk about that in 42 seconds when the camera comes here and the producer says, talk about his striking? I don't know. Yeah. It's going to take me a long time to figure that out. But I believe that's my job. I don't want to play the role of television fight analyst as it exists now, because I think the way it exists now is horseshit. I want to figure out how to do it in a way that's meaningful in the future. So it's tricky. It's tricky and it's stressful. And the things are stressful if they matter to you, if they're important to you, if they're meaningful to you, if they're like the point of what you do. Like we said earlier, some people make chairs. There are people who make chairs. That chair is an expression of who they are, their life's work.
So, but if we talk now, we're talking about it anyway, because this Saturday, UFC 264, Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, part 3. I know you did a breakdown about the fight a while ago with George St. Pierre, which was absolutely amazing, by the way. So, how do you look at this fight now? You said saying you can't predict it maybe because they're going to change, of course, because Conor is going to do something about the calf kicks, and Dustin Poirier is anticipating about that. So, in your mind, if you analyze this fight now, which is merely impossible, then probably, but
well, I think there are like super interesting things about it. Like the meaning of it is really important. Like, I think at its highest level. So we mentioned John Jones. I love John Jones. I'm a huge fan of John Jones. John Jones has publicly said before his biggest fights, he used like cocaine and literally sabotaged himself. I don't know, I didn't watch all of it specifically, but he seemed to imply that he gave himself an out. And a lot of fighters, I don't know, Marloes, if you've ever done this or seen this or know about people who have done this, but this idea that if you hold something back and lose, you can say to yourself, well, I would have won if I worked harder. I would have won if my foot wasn't sore. I would have won if I didn't party in Brazil a week before I fought whoever. That out, you know? And Conor kind of had that. Jorge had that when he first fought Usman. It's a week's notice. It can be very freeing to have that. It can be very freeing. It can give you short-term success. But when you remove that thing and you say, I am literally going to do everything within my power. My whole life will lead to this moment. I will train with everything I have, and I will save nothing for the fucking swim back. All preparation will be done. And then you go in there, you in theory can be free, truly, truly free. And so you have both of these guys who ideally have that ability. In the first fight, Dustin was overwhelmed by it. He did not have the experience to deal with that amount of mental pressure. In the second fight, Conor McGregor believed he was still just automatically Conor McGregor, forgetting that all the success he had was the result of hard work. Now you have both of them at their best. And with both of them at their very best, their very freest, to predict how that goes, I'm not capable. You know, I'm not capable. But that's what excites me, if that really is. And the beauty of it is, if you lose, you must go back and go about your life now with the truth. I did everything I could. I trained to the maximum of my ability. I prepared in every way I could, and I went out there and I let it out, and I failed. That's very difficult, but it's very powerful. This is part of the journey. Trying, failing, giving everything you have, and finding out it's not enough. It's part of the journey, and that's the beauty. Now I'm stoked about that fight. I don't know if I get to discuss it that way in any context on an ESPN desk ever. Probably not. Instead, they would be like, what about the calf kicks, bro? What about his big left hand? What's going to happen if Dustin Poirier takes him down? We can talk about any of that. But to me, this is what makes it meaningful. This is why I deeply care.
I'm going totally off track of the fight now. What was your biggest lesson, biggest insight, I don't know how to put it, what a better way to put it, that you have from martial arts? You take all that 40 years of experience into one lesson or insight.
oh God, I think at true abject failure, like going into, it's tricky. Failing, I think failing has been the most powerful thing for me. It was also why I wanted to go fight. Like, I wanted to fight because I truly wanted to live every day as a martial artist. I wanted to analyze it. I wanted to commentate it. I wanted to be able to, like, and I've worked in television in Canada before, and I used to sing in a rock band. I wore eye makeup and had big hair, and I knew these people would never accept that guy talking about martial arts, no matter how much I loved it. And I figured I should fight one time. And one time became two. And then became three, and I won. And then it became four, and I won a little local belt. And the path of it, but the failures, I think, were the most important. And the truth of them, you know, of all the cliches on planet Earth, my very favorite is the moment of truth, right? It's the moment of truth. Like, who are you right now? Like, what did you, how hard did you work? How alert are you? How ready are you? How courageous are you? You know, what are you? And when you fail in the moment of truth, it's incredibly painful. And that pain, you're going to decide consciously or unconsciously to move towards it, look at it, learn from it, go, oh my God, this is harder, this is scary. Or you're going to say, well, that was bullshit. You know, the ref cheated me. Or, you know, I slipped and that shouldn't have happened. And I think the finding truth in the failure made me more successful in subsequent fights, but also in life. Like, and I'm not afraid to fail, and I'm not afraid to look stupid anymore. And I think, before fighting. But when you get carried out on a stretcher while people boo you, you never cry so hard in your life as the morning, crying alone in a hotel room, bawling, feeling like you're going to die, with your wife on the other end crying because she's hearing how just devastated you are. And then you build back from that. And the building back from it is worth it. It's worth it. Yeah.
So, but you've been on stage. You've been a rock star. I bet you've been booed off the stage once or twice.
It's not the same. It's not the same.
I was about to ask.
No.
Why not? Impression of who you are. You're also very vulnerable on stage. What is then the big difference of taking the stage of an MMA cage or a music stage?
Somehow for me, performing, and this was super helpful, it is still helpful, but singing, talking, it's kind of easy somehow. Somehow it became easy. And I think it became easy because of the 10,000 hours that I did it. But it became easy. There was no inherent risk. If you sucked that night, but there's also something, it's in us genetically, like, and I don't know if it's different. The whole experience, I know I can't, there's so little I can understand about, I can't understand what it's like to be a woman. I can't understand, particularly when you were fighting, like, it must have been just 100 times harder, weirder. Family, judgment, people in the gym trying to scare you out of there, people not understanding you. It must be just a whole different level. So there's differences in it. But for a man, from what I understand, and I could be wrong, you know, this is again, understanding information that I've been given, but not certain of all of it, is something about when males would compete in our history, the male who would lose would be rejected from the tribe. And he would be cursed to never mate, never have the family, and have to pick up scraps and never be accepted in the tribe again. I don't know if that's true. It feels true. I've heard this before. I've had this discussion with other people, including people in science. I don't know how that relates to your experience. But for me, I felt that this complete, what's the word? Humiliation. George St. Pierre uses that word all the time. I'm sure a woman, a child, a man, anyone from any walk of life would experience that. This true humiliation that you shouldn't feel, and you know consciously you shouldn't feel, and you know you've done everything you can, you know you were brave and worked hard, and yet I just felt this true humiliation.
Did you feel humiliated as a man or as a martial artist?
both. Both. As a human, probably. It's very difficult to try. It's hard to differentiate because in the end, you're a man or a woman or whomever, however you identify, and a martial artist and a human being and from your town, you know.
But the fact that you were referring to the tribes and the man that is being kicked out, it makes it that part of your identity is pushed forward into fighting where you do not have it in music when you're performing.
So I'm glad you brought that up because now I wonder if I just used that as an explanation for my feeling. Because I hear that, when the male would lose in this tribe, they would feel this. Mm-hmm. And I use that as an explanation. Doesn't mean it's true. Doesn't mean it's true at all.
Was it my Sammy? I don't know. I don't know her name anymore, but it was in Bellator. And I was supposed to win. And she didn't make weight. And long story. Anyway, I was so pissed off. And I was standing in that cage. And I've never felt rage towards an opponent. But that time I felt it. The only thing I thought was, I will hurt you. And normally I will win.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Wow.
I wanted to punch
Did you hurt her?
No, she hurt me.
Wow.
I wanted to punch her, and I thought she would go toe-to-toe with me, but she shoot me straight away, probably because she knew what I wanted to do. Yeah. And I ended up in a guard, and I remember that. I was like, oh, Marloes, this is... because I knew it was at the end of the first round. I was already ashamed that I didn't finish her in the first round. Mm-hmm. So during the fight, I was like, oh, Marloes, come on, this isn't happening here. And then she did an armbar on me. I didn't even have time to tap. The referee... Otherwise, she would have broken it completely. And I have been crying so extremely hard in the locker room that there was a doctor. He just laughed because I was like hyperventilating and also about that feeling. I know it. So I think it's more, from my perspective, more of a human thing than a male.
I think you're right. I'm glad I talked to you about that because I've identified it as this alpha male primitive historical thing, but I don't think it is that. I think you're right, and I'm really glad that you told me that. Thank you, because those are really painful things. There's a lot there too, because we're looking at also if we really try to draw a lesson from it, because I had that experience too. I didn't get beat up like that, but this like trying to get it done because I think I'm so like I'm gonna crush this guy, and then losing. Again, it's a loss where you get it. But when you look at that night, that experience that you had, and you look at it in the context of living as a metaphor for life, you were trying to control everything, right? Like you were trying to literally control it all. I'm going to go there, I'm going to smash her, this is going to happen. And then all of a sudden you're taken down. And we don't control most things. We have control over how we respond to things. We have control over their readiness and how mentally sharp we are and how prepared we are and how good our mind is and how free we are. But we don't control her. I don't control that guy. I don't control that ref. I don't control that audience. I don't control all of it. I don't control. And you learn that pretty quick in fighting. And the best performances you ever had, we talked about this earlier, you just feel like you're watching it happen. You feel like you're an observer almost. You're an active observer.
Yeah, about free and the energy that flows free. And the more you think, the more you get stuck into that energy. And when the energy cannot flow, then the moment you stop thinking, it's over, basically. Well, that's my experience. But I also think you have different type of fighters. You have the people who are very analytical, that they test out in the first round, and then they crack the code, and then know what to do in the second. Then you have the people intuitive, and they just go in and they think they're just doing something. But it's just what you say about the baseball player. They see so many things, but they do not realize it with the things that they see. How do you feel about it? Do you have two different types of, like in general, two different types?
So that book, Thinking Fast and Slow, kind of acknowledges that and uses examples that in the perfect world, we're supposed to be able to kind of do both and have them operate simultaneously. And sometimes I think we do. And other times, you know, when you get really comfortable with something, you can be doing that. You're allowing it to happen, and you're out here looking at it, analyzing it, making adaptations, and still and those two things are feeding each other. And I'm sure some of us, and sometimes in our moments, we're more one or more the other. But in a perfect world, we're able to access both. If you're driving your car for 2 hours and you suddenly go, oh my God, I haven't even been paying attention to the road. You feel like maybe you've been a dangerous driver, but you're actually the best driver at that point.
Yeah.
You've just allowed it to happen. While that's happening, you can also have a conversation.
You probably 70K of training hours.
What's that?
You're probably then when you can do that simultaneously. You're at the 70K, not the 10.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. Where you're.
Feels like Tiffany van Soest who's talking. She was in a podcast talking about it. What you just described is just Tiffany talking about.
Very philosophical also.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Philosophy used to sound like something, foofy to me. And now I see it's just a different way in many ways to look at real things. Like you can look at how, my blood takes oxygenated hemoglobin through my artery to my brain. And you can describe that same process philosophically, and it's still the same process. And by understanding it both ways, it's like having different words for sand or snow. You start to connect to something more deeply. When I'm in Amsterdam, I hope we can all sit in a room together and do this.
We will.
That would be amazing.
Is this supposed to take 30 minutes, and we're now talking 1.5 hours?
We're now in 90 minutes in already. Yeah. So this conversation went completely different than I imagined it when we started this, but I'm very happy for it. So no complaints whatsoever here. But I don't want to hold you here too much longer. But I have one more thing I want to ask you. I know you do analysis also for Bellator. Next week you have Bellator 262 coming up with the championship fight. Juliana Velasquez, she's fighting one of her own, Denise Kornman.
Oh, yes.
So I know this is a very interesting fight. They both have a judo background, but I want to know your thoughts about this fight.
So I just yesterday did a breakdown on Denise, and it's really fun. It was short. Sometimes I do like 30-second ones. But what I noticed about her was, in at least this one, was her intentions can be these two punches, and it's something we talked about earlier. In a perfect world, they will land and everything goes great. And you fall down. The ring card girls, hold up, but you're the winner. They lift your hand. The crowd cheers. You get a bonus. But the world doesn't always work that way. You throw two punches, and it produces some other reaction. And she handles whatever happens really well. That's what I noticed about. And we could say she's in flow. She's, any movement will create something, and that thing she's really good at. And I thought that was really cool about her, how she enters into an exchange, or how she starts a sequence, or what she creates ends up leading to something else. And I really like that about her. Velasquez is a badass too. That's a really great fight. That's a really, really great fight. I won't be there for that one, but I'll be doing, I'm at home. This is crazy that this is a job, but I can watch it. Like just, here in my lab, I got a little TV. I'll watch it. Yeah. And the second I see something that I like, I'll text a guy sitting next to the cage. And on WhatsApp, he'll send me that clip. And then I can just build a breakdown right there and put it up on Bellator, social, 10 minutes later. And
that's insane.
It's insane. And when I first started doing that, they just airdrop, on Apple products was just new. Now it just feels normal, but I would be sitting back in the VIP section, and Chris from Bellator would be sitting at the desk, and something would happen, and he'd look back and he'd kind of be like, do you want that? And I'd be like, yeah. And then he would just airdrop it to me, and I'd sit there and go, bing, and it was in my, bing, and it's in my fucking iPad. And I just, now that feels sort of normal, but that was only 2 years ago. And of course he can now send it from cage side to me at home. These things become normal, but you guys are in your late 30s, Dennis?
No, I'm in my mid 45.
Yeah, you're 45, and Marloes, you're 38, 39. No, not even.
40.
You're 40. Wow. Well, I'm 50. So I lived in a time there were no cell phones, there was no internet, there was none of that stuff. And now somebody can send me a clip of a knockout to my cell phone 3 minutes after it happened in California, and I can make it and send it out into the world and everybody can see it. To me, that literally is voodoo. Like, it's literally magic. And so I'll be doing that on Friday when they fight.
Good. Yeah, it's crazy to think about those things. It's all science, but if you think about it, it's like, I don't know, I break my brain over those kind of things. So I stay away from thinking about that too much. But that's probably for the best.
Robert, I really want to thank you for your thoughts and how you shared it with us. It was I don't think because we're here once, it's late, so I will go to sleep. But I don't think I will sleep for a very long time. You give me so much fun.
What a nice thing to say. Wow, thank you. No, it was a real pleasure. Like, I mean, Dennis is one of these guys, you meet him for 10 minutes, you feel like you've known him your whole life. Whenever we see each other, we want to hang out. But yeah, I'm hoping it's July 25th. It's a Sunday. I don't think they'll have an audience yet, but it'll be streaming. So if I'm there, I'll probably get in the 21st or the 22nd. So hopefully, yeah, we can all sit and, like, you know, drink a Dutch beer and sit in a room together. But that's a very nice thing to say. I've enjoyed this immensely. Thank you so much.
Same here. I learned a lot from this. And like I said, it went totally different than what I anticipated before. But there we go again. Anticipation can be a bitch. So, yeah, I really... I really appreciate your time and all the profound knowledge you shared with us. It's been a treat. Thank you very much.
Until I see you in the Netherlands, enjoy the hostilities, my friends.
Bink.
Bink.
Always wanted to do that.